Hello, friends, and it's Funky Play Brothers, and please remember to subscribe to our YouTube. And today I'm reading part 2 of Tales from the Pizzaplex, number 8, B7-2, story B7-2. Last time, Billy got himself turned into a robot by a doctor, and then he fell asleep in a car, and he was getting crushed by a car compactor, and then he woke up not a robot. Billy hesitated, then nodded. "I thought you might," Dr. Herrera said. She reached into the pocket of her white coat and pulled out a hand mirror. Standing, Dr. Herrera stepped toward the head of Billy's bed and held the mirror out in front of him. Billy took a deep breath and looked at his reflection. The last time Billy inspected himself, what he'd seen was nothing like what he was seeing now. Gone were his hard edges created by the metal plating. Gone were the black eyes. Gone was the bare skull. Yes, Billy's ear was still missing, but other than that, he looked pretty normal. He even saw a bit of his dad in the small eyes and nose, round cheeks, and wide mouth that he saw in the mirror, as it had when Billy was a child. Billy's brown hair was sticking up haphazardly in a variety of directions. His hair was maybe 3 inches long. Obviously, he'd been in the coma for quite some time. If the hair itself hadn't been a hint of the past time, the condition of Billy's scars told the rest of the story. When Billy had imagined Dr. Herr cutting into him and taking out all the extra parts, he'd endeavously jagged incisions crusted with blood and tied with dark black threads. Instead, what he saw were faintly red scars, bracketing his cheeks, forehead, and jaw. Clearly, he was well on his way to healing from his wounds. Billy tried to take the mirror from Dr. Herrera's hand, but he found that his fingers wouldn't work quite right. Dr. Herrera shifted the mirror as he gestured with her other hand at Billy's right arm. "You're going to be a little stiff after being out for so long," she said. You got passive physical therapy while you were out. Manual movement of your limbs to keep the muscle limber and prevent too much loss of muscle mass. However, you'll need physical therapy so you can learn to use a crutch with the right arm until your right leg is ready for a new prosthetic." Billy shook his head violently. "No," he shouted. The word came out as a long and loud "oh." Billy locked his gaze on Dr. Herrera. "No more prosthetics." The words sounded like "oh" or "rahik." Dr. Herrera seemed to get it. She pulled the mirror away from him and stuck it back in her pocket. As she soothed, "It's okay, Billy. We won't do anything you won't want." She gently put a hand on Billy's shoulder. In spite of the fear of her, the touch felt good. Dr. Herrera backed up and sat down again. "Obviously," she said, we had to do everything we did without your contest because you weren't able to give it." She leaned towards Billy. "Some of the colleagues didn't think we'd be able to save you, but I knew we could, and we have with a lot of help from you." She gestured at Billy's prone form. Your body's ability to heal has been quite extraordinary. You've become much further, much faster than anyone could have predicted, and I expect you'll get your strength back in no time. Our part is pretty much done from here on out, with some expectations, choices about what's done to continue your healing will be up to you. Billy scrunched up his forehead. Expectations? He opened his mouth and tried to form the word. Dr. Herrera held up a hand. "I know what you're thinking. What expectations, right?" Billy nodded. Dr. Herrera nodded too. She took a long breath and exhaled. "I don't want to overload you with too much right now," she said. "You're still healing. but you might as well know that social service assigned you to an advocate because of what the police found in your house. The state is requiring a physiological evaluation now that you're out of your coma. That non-negotiable. But if you're deemed competent, you'll get to call the shots going forward. He'll get to call the shots. Dr. Harrow's words echoed in Billy's head long after she left his room. What what would that be like? Billy wondered. Would he be able to make good decisions about his life? The last thing Billy remembered before scrambling to the pain of the compactor had been crushing feeling. To the loss of the compactor, he crushing feeling of loss. That was why letting the compactor press down on him had felt so right, so welcome. Now Billy had been given a second chance. He could make a whole new set of decisions. He could have a new life, the life he thought he'd missed out on forever. That thought was both exciting and terrifying. Given that Billy couldn't remember choosing anything for himself that wasn't part of the animatronic delusion, he didn't know how he'd decide what to do next. But he didn't have to face that right away. He would be in the hospital for a while longer. For that, Billy was grateful. In just a short time, Billy had been conscious in his barren hospital room. It had started to feel like a welcome haven. He'd liked its plain walls and its lowered blinds, which he asked Gloria to lower after Dr. Herrera left. Billy liked the little room, but the big blue sky outside felt threatening for some reason. All the sunshiny openness was too much for him to process. A couple hours after Dr. Herrera left him, Billy got to eat his first meal as his new life, having spent most of his life eating the animatronic diet of only white foods. He was eager to try something new. Unfortunately, the evening meal was chicken and rice with green beans. The chicken and rice were familiar and therefore unwelcome, but he eagerly dug into the green beans. They didn't taste as good as he'd hoped they would, but the red jello dessert was wonderful in his new life. Billy decided he'd eat a lot of red foods. The second day of Billy's new life, he met his physical therapist, Angie. On one side of Angie's head, her hair was short into a buzz cut. On the other side, her hair was long and woven into a complicated braid. Angie didn't look like she was very strong, but Billy quickly found out that she was. Angie came into Billy's room carrying an armful of bandages, a leg brace, and a crutch. Okay, Billy, she said. After she'd introduced herself, we need to get you up on your feet, or foot, as the case may be. She grinned at him. Billy laughed as his muscles were tense. Did he really want to try to stand up? Billy's memory of being on his feet wasn't a good one. He clearly remembered the way he'd carrying down the sidewalk to the junkyard, where he thought he was going to die, and that would have been with both prosthetic. Now he had one leg still recovering from surgery, and the other was completely gone. How would he stand? I hear you, Angie said. I didn't say anything, Billy said. You didn't have to. Your trepidation is written all over your face. Trepidation is a good word, Billy said. Glad you like it. Angie lowered the railing on the left side of Billy's bed. Earlier that morning, Gloria had removed all of the lines that had connected Billy to the monitors that had clustered around his bed. Your vital signs are perfect, Gloria had said. Dr. Herrera says you don't need monitoring anymore. Gloria had then looked at Billy's IV. How's your pain? She had asked. Billy thought about it. He was surprised to realize that the aches and throbs he'd felt when he'd first woken up had adapted a lot. He was sore, but he wasn't in agony. Not bad, he said. Good, Gloria said. You haven't had any meds going through this line since last night, just glucose. And now you're eating on your own. So let's get this out of you. She proceeded to remove the IV that had been poking into the back of his right hand. Billy was happy to get rid of that. Now that he was no longer plugged into anything, Billy could move more freely. Even so, he was more wary when Angie leaned over him and said, Go ahead and put your arm around my neck." The idea of doing that made Billy very uncomfortable. He felt hesitant and self-conscious. "Come on," Angie said. "Don't be shy. I'm tough." She grinned at him. Billy smiled. He did as she told him to. Over the next hour, Angie got Billy sitting up, and then uh, ba- band uh, after bandaging his remaining leg, and encasing it in a black padded brace, she taught him how to use a crutch. With his remaining arm between the crutch and the brace leg, and Billy managed to not only stand, but also walk out of his room and down the hall. "You're amazing," Angie said at the end of the hour. "Dr. Ferrero said you healed unusually fast." She was right. Angie helped Billy get back to his bed, which was harder than he thought it would be. Maybe he'd overdone it, he thought. Some of the pain he'd felt the day before was returning. "You're probably going to be sore," Angie said. "Using a crutch is no picnic. When you get new prosthetics, moving around will be a lot easier." Billy immediately felt the same horror he'd felt when Dr. Ferrero had mentioned new prosthetics. He vehemently shook his head. "I don't want new prosthetics," he told Angie. Angie crossed her arms over her hot pink cotton uniform top. "Why ever, why ever not? They'll give you a much better life." Billy kept shaking his head. He was surprised when his eyes were even filled with tears. Angie perched on the edge of Billy's bed. She put her hand slightly on his chest. "It's okay," she said softly. Her voice was much gentler than it had been when she'd been barking orders at him while she helped him learn to use the crutch. "I get it," Angie said. "I heard what happened to you. You went through hell, and if I was you, I feel the same way about adding something else to my body." "But Billy," Angie's voice softened even more, "before you were using the prosthetic to try to be something, you weren't. If you get them now, you'll be using them to become yourself again." Billy pressed his lips. He understood what Angie was saying, but the idea of doing anything else to his body was terrifying. "You don't have to take any actions now, obviously," Angie said. "But if I were you, I would keep the option open. Revisit the idea when you feel better." Billy nodded. He was too rattled to speak. Angie pushed off the bed and gave him a thumbs up. "I'll be back in the morning for another to uh toward toward tur I'll be back in the morning for another torture lesson." She winked at him. That made Billy laugh. He decided he'd do what she suggested. Maybe something in the future. He'd rethink the prosthetics. The third day of Billy's new life started with another walking session with Angie. In addition to helping him get more comfortable using the crutch, Angie showed him how to raise and lower the rails on his bed, and she had him practice 3 times getting himself from the bed to the bathroom so he could use the toilet. Billy was surprised and pleased when he was able to manage that task. Not long after Angie left him, Billy was the psychological evaluation. Had the psychological evaluation Dr. Hare had told him about. This was done by a grim-faced, bald man named Dr. Coleman. Someone Billy didn't like at all. Dr. Coleman, Billy thought, didn't like Billy either. Dr. Coleman's questions were curt, and Dr. Coleman kept staring at Billy's ears, or rather, where Billy's ears should have been. Billy was glad when Dr. Coleman left. After Dr. Coleman was gone, Gloria came in to check on Billy. When she found him touching what remained of his ears, she looked into his ears. "Are you okay?" "Dr. Coleman was disgusted by my ears," Billy said. "I could tell." Gloria rolled her eyes. "Don't get me started on Dr. Coleman." "But he's right," Billy said. "My ears are ugly." "Not ugly," Gloria said, "just different." "I need a hat," Billy said. Gloria shook her head. Billy crossed his arms and nodded. Gloria shrugged. "I'll see what I can do." She winked at him and trotted out of the room. An hour later, Gloria brought Billy his lunch, a ham sandwich on pumpkin bread and a little pile of raw carrots with ranch dip. Billy was familiar with ranch dip, but ham and pumpernickel were new to him. He liked them both. He also enjoyed the carrots. He had a dim recollection of eating carrots when he was very little, but he'd forgotten how sweet they were. Orange foods would be good in his diet too, he concluded, and brown foods were going to be a must. Billy's dessert was chocolate pudding, which was the best thing he'd tasted so far in his new life. He loved chocolate. The second he tasted it, he remembered eating chocolate ice cream when he was little. How could he have gone so long without chocolate? That alone was hard to imagine. After lunch, Gloria came to get Billy's tray. Before she picked it up, she said, "Close your eyes." Billy blinked and complied. As soon as he did, he felt Gloria's warm hands against the side of his ears. Something soft came down over the top of his head. Gloria's hands went away. "Okay," she said, "open your eyes." Billy opened his eyes. Gloria was holding a small mirror in front of his face. In the mirror, he saw that he was now wearing a multicolor striped hat. "It's a Rasta beanie hat," Gloria said. "One of my co-workers crotchets crochets them." Billy turned his head to one side and then the other. He grinned. "This is great," he said, and it was. The hat made of fine threads that felt lightweight and not too warm, covered his missing ears, and the bright colors made him look like he felt a lot better than he did. "Thank you," Billy said. And Gloria patted his shoulder. "You're very welcome." She picked up his tray, waved at him, and left his room. After Gloria left, Billy kept touching his new hat. It made him smile. The hat had been a big surprise. But what happened next was an even bigger surprise. Billy started getting visitors. From the 3 years prior to the end of his animatronic life, the 3 years after his mother had died, Billy had lived a pretty isolated life. After that, Malaha, his online girlfriend, for a short time, and a couple of delivery people, Billy had hardly interacted with anyone. He certainly hadn't had any friends. The new Billy, though, was going to have people in his life. This he decided after enjoying a day's worth of surprise visitors. The first person who came to see Billy was Dr. Lingstrom. Billy had seen Dr. Lingstrom since his mom had died 3 years before. Dr. Lingstrom hadn't changed much in that time, still wearing big glasses and piling her burned hair on top of her head in a large bun. Dr. Lingstrom's smile was wide when she rushed into Billy's room and came to his bedside to give him a hug. "I've missed you," Dr. Lingstrom said as she bent over Billy, unable to hug Dr. Lingstrom back because she was pinning one arm to his side. With her upper body, Billy just smiled and said, as best as he could, "You too." He realized this was true, even though he'd never really enjoyed his time with Dr. Lingstrom, and she'd never seemed to like anything he'd said or done. He felt a strange affection from the woman who used to talk to him, ask him so many questions about why he wanted to be a robot. Now, of course, Billy understood that Dr. Lingstrom had just been trying to help him see through his delusions. The fact that she hadn't been able to do that wasn't going to be something Billy held against her. Intuitively, Billy understood he was going to need help to be the new version of himself. He was happy Dr. Lingstrom might be around to give him that help, so much so that he even said as much. "I want to be a new man," Billy told Dr. Lingstrom after she took a seat in the brown chair. "Can you help me with that, Dr. Lingstrom?" His lack of tongue mangled her name, but he did his best. Dr. Lingstrom smiled widely. "I'd love to, Billy, but don't call me doctor. I won't be helping you as a doctor. You've aged out of my patient pool. I'm a child physiologist, physio- physicologist, psychologist. However, I'm happy to help as a friend. You can call me Alice." Billy frowned. That would be a tough name for him. Two of his pivotal sounds were ones he couldn't form, and Dr. Lingstrom noticed the frown. "Oh," she said, "what am I thinking?" She waved the air and laughed. "Silly me. Call me I. It will, it will be your nickname for me." Billy grinned. He'd never called someone by a nickname before. The next hour was maybe the happiest hour Billy could remember since he was a little kid, and he was sorry when it was over. But after Dr. Lingstrom, no, AI left, Billy was even more surprised by his next visitors. Some peaceful gray clouds were starting to blot out the sun, and two young men, probably about Billy's age, his true age, not his animatronic age, stepped through his open doorway. Eager to meet new people, Billy looked at the men expectantly, but he didn't think he knew them. No, wait, he did know them. "Clark," Billy said to the shorter of the two guys. The name came out as Ark. "Hey, Billy," Clark said. He gave Billy a big tooth grin, and Billy's mind flashed to an image of a little red-headed boy pretending to be a robot in kindergarten. Billy grinned back. "Hi, Clark." Clark was still a redhead, but he wasn't little anymore. Short, yes, but he was well-muscled. His chest was huge. "Good to see you, Billy," Clark's companion said. "Cool hat." "Thanks." "Hi, Peter," Billy said. He laughed when he realized his version of Peter's name sounded more like Peter. "Sorry," he continued, struggling his way through the words he wanted to say. "No tongue." "No problem," Peter said. "We heard." This surprised Billy. How was this old friend heard about his tongue? Peter, who was now 6'2" and lanky, with a long black ponytail, pointed a finger at Billy. "You're a big deal," he said. "Everyone's talking about you." Billy frowned. He wasn't sure he liked that idea. "Why?" he asked. Peter walked over and dropped into the brown chair. "Are you kidding? You're the robot boy who survived being crushed." "I'm not a robot," Billy said. It was the first time Billy had said the words out loud, and he wasn't sure how he felt about them. Part of him was happy he no longer felt like a robot. Part of him, though, was lost without his robot self. Billy's body felt so strange to him. Now Billy wasn't in it. Wasn't the animatronic he'd gotten used to being. It wasn't the child he'd been before he tried to change himself. He was something in between the two, something that felt strange and incomplete. Peter's laughter was loud in the small room. "I'm glad to hear you say that," Peter said. "You were pretty far out there for a while." "Pete," Clark snapped, stepping over from the end of Billy's bed. Clark smacked Peter on the shoulder. "What?" Peter said in a mock innocence. He was in Looneyville. For the next few minutes, they tried to one-up each other with silly names for Billy's years trying to be an animatronic. Maybe Billy should have been hurt by the teasing, but he wasn't. His friends were treating him like one of the guys that helped him feel a little less lost and scared. So, friends, thanks for listening. Tune in next time for part 3. So, friends, thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Follow us on Twitter at the Funky Play Bros. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at the Funky Play Brothers. Support our vlog at cashapp at the $ Funky Play Brothers so we can have more unboxings, more taste tests, more adventures, more monies, and for support. Thank you for watching. Bye.